Well, hello and welcome to the Profit Express. I'm Tim Healy, and I'm inviting you to join me each and every week so together we can win the battle for business. So as always, thanks for being on board. Thanks for sharing some of your time with me today. I'm very excited for today's guest. Story is a very powerful story, and I'm going to kind of start off like this. What happens if you have equated your own self-worth to titles and promotions, but that gets all taken away from you? What if one day your own health is taken away from you rather unexpectedly? What do you do? How do you respond? Well, that's exactly what happened to today's guest. When first off, she had a rather public firing that made the 6 o'clock news and a brain tumor diagnosis that caused her to rethink everything about her life personally and professionally. And she realized as she was going through a rather public firing and a brain tumor diagnosis that her ideas of making up the corporate ladder and success and titles and promotions were coming at a big price. Today's guest, Becca Pearce. She's a former healthcare CEO, and she's here to share her story of how she actually responded to those two life-threatening events, one being that very public, painful firing on the 6 o'clock news, and of course the other being a brain tumor diagnosis. And she's here to share how she's made it to being a personal executive coach, and she's the author of a new book, which we're going to be talking about today as well, of course. And that book is You Don't Have to Achieve to Be Loved. So it is a real pleasure to welcome aboard the Profit Express, Becca Pearce. Pleasure to have you today. How are you?
I am amazing, and I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Well, my pleasure. I like the energy. That's how we like to start here on the Profit Express. So, listen, all humans go through trials and tribulations. Some are more challenging and harder to take than others. You had two doozies, if I may say so. You had reached high up the corporate ladder. Healthcare CEO, you were the healthcare of Maryland Health Benefit Exchange. And unfortunately, things didn't work out, and you were hired, and it made the evening news. So not just getting fired, but then getting fired on the evening news. So when you wake up the next morning, Becca, here's my first question to you. What are your first thoughts that very next morning after getting fired like that?
Well, in all seriousness, the first thought I had the next morning is, "Wow, I'm hungover." um, my first thoughts were, "What happened? Who am I?"
Hmm.
In true seriousness, I was like, "I can't believe I don't have this job anymore, and who am I? Like, what am I supposed to do?" I mean, I worked 7 days a week, so on that Saturday morning, I'm like, "I don't know what I'm supposed to do today."
Right. So that was the first impact. Um, Now, this is interesting. I've in doing some of my research for the show, obviously it was a healthcare exchange, uh, from the Affordable Care Act. And you weren't just the CEO, but you really had a bit of a mission there where you believed deeply in your ability, and having that role to
Mhm.
effectively bring healthcare to the masses. And so when you were let go and it didn't work out, did you take that personally?
I really did. I mean, I think I often say that I couldn't have believed more in what we were doing, and I
Mm.
couldn't have tried harder to make it work. And I think that I had this idea that I was Obamacare in the state of Maryland. Now, I
Hmm.
mean, the funny thing is, right, there are a gazillion people who were involved in Obamacare. There were a gazillion people who were involved in the Affordable Care Act, right? It was not just me, but I felt so connected to it and so much of who I was. And I thought I was going to be the one to take it over the end line. And so when that didn't happen and when I lost my job, yeah, I absolutely took it personally. I just kept saying, but no, I'm not done. Like, I want to make this work. And why are you doing this to me? It was very much like, why are you doing this to me kind of
Hmm.
feeling at the time.
So I know in part of the work you do as a coach, you address how women go through the trials and tribulations of the corporate experience, being a mom, raising a family, and that work-life balance, which, again, being a man, being a dad, I can only, empathize with. Um, how was it to be a female in a role like that? I mean, that's, at the pinnacle in the healthcare industry at the time. Um, speak to that for a moment, if you could.
It was, it's interesting because when people ask me as a coach, what would you say to somebody who's, going up the corporate ladder? How did you do it as a woman? And my truthful answer is
Hmm.
I dropped being a woman. Like I just became a man, right? You drop all of the emotions at the door. Anything that you bring to the table as a woman, you drop at the door as soon as you walk in, and you
Hmm.
put on this other veneer of uh, invincibility and invulnerability and walking through and no, I've got it, right? Nobody's ever going to see me sweat. There was a time during the exchange where I had to walk into a room. I was the youngest person in the room and the only woman in a room. And I was talking to the CEO of major, like of an IBM entity. And I sat down in that room of 12 men and I said, stop effing with the government's money. Like, what are you doing? And it was just this, I had to show up totally different than I would in my everyday life today.
Okay, so that's very interesting because I've had other guests on, female entrepreneurs, women uh, coaches or executives who spoke about the experience of being a woman in corporate America while also balancing, life work balance, raising a family, et cetera. And I have to be honest, I've had a number of them over the years. And I want to go back to what you said. I want to make sure the audience didn't lose that because it caught my attention. You said you had to stop being a woman. Did I hear that right?
In that room, I felt like
Yeah.
I had to show up as a quote unquote businessman would, which is anger is the only emotion that is allowed in the boardroom. Decisions are made only on data, not
Mm.
on emotion or humans. There are a lot of rules that come along with the quote unquote businessman.
Wow. Now hold on a second. I've got a vulnerable side. Okay, we're not all just these horrible.
But I would bet that that vulnerable side does not show up if you were in a corporate environment when you're doing your trainings and things like that. I'm guessing maybe that vulnerable side shows up as you're doing the training because vulnerability shows up when you're, doing good business development. But as the CEO of an organization, you can't actually show vulnerability. The one time that I actually spoke to somebody on my team where I thought to myself, I need to communicate that this may not be working the way it's supposed to, and
Hmm.
I barely scratched the surface, and tears sprung to her eyes because everybody's looking for that CEO to handle all the problems, to save the world, to hold it all together. And so you cannot show that as that CEO, you cannot show that. Man, woman, dog, whatever, you can't show that invulnerable. You have to be invulnerable.
Now, but do you think though, because now now we're 2026.
Uh-huh.
Is it accepted or received differently? Because again, I'm a firm believer. There's men, there's women. We each have strengths, weaknesses, very clear distinctions of what makes us special and unique. I'm a big believer in that.
Hmm.
Um, you were with the healthcare, it was about 2011, 2013. So it was a number of years ago,
Hmm.
not
Was
too
a
long
long time
ago,
ago. Yeah.
but a number of years ago. Do you think, again, because you could probably observe this in your coaching role,
I
that it
do, and
has
I'm glad you brought
changed?
that up. It has definitely changed. In fact, I do a keynote speech on the hidden truths about women's leadership and how women are biologically predisposed to leadership post pandemic. Because What we realized during the pandemic is that people crave connection. They are craving to be heard. They are craving to feel like they belong someplace. And women are biologically predisposed to this connection, to listening, to be a part of the group and bring this to the table. So, where I say, I had to do that, I think there is space as there is still this very lonely space as being the CEO where it's very difficult because you can't truly communicate to your staff, or you feel like you're stuck, you can't truly communicate to your staff. At the same time, I believe that predisposition as a woman
Hmm.
leadership, and this idea of shifting leadership to a place where employees are heard and felt, and they feel like they're heard and they feel like they're part of the bigger picture. That is definitely shifting in the world today. It's no longer, the Jack Welch kind of idea. It's moving more towards the human side.
And that was, you said you did a keynote on that topic, and that was really the sea change of that, the shift was post pandemic.
Yes, for sure. And I think so because that's when I think people started to, there was a collective opportunity for everybody to slow down and say, what are we doing and what is this all about? Right. And
Mm,
so I think that's when people started to, especially the fear that showed up across the board.
yeah.
If you really take yourself back to 2020, there was so much fear,
Hmm.
and the only place to come together at the time for a lot of people was family, obviously, but people were searching for it at work as well.
So, hindsight's 2020. So if you look back to your experience, at Maryland Health Benefit Exchange, if you could have a do-over in that experience, what would that be?
I actually have two.
You have
The first
two.
is
Okay.
I have two, one personal and one professional. In the state of Maryland, we were very, very set on doing everything, right? We wanted to solve everything. We wanted to be the best. We wanted to be the first. We wanted to be all of these things, right? So when every single um, entity came to us and said, "Can you put this in your new system? Can you make it do this? And can you make it do this? And can you help it? This community and this community and this community." While it would have been amazing to be able to say yes to all those things, the problem is
Mm,
we did say yes to all those things and it didn't turn on because we were trying to do too many things at once. I would
mm,
have said no to more people. I would have pushed
okay.
back and said, let us get this off the ground and then let's build everything in. So understanding where and when to say no is
Okay.
absolutely my biggest learning from that. And the second one is for those 2 years, I never once set foot in my daughter's school. And it is my biggest regret that
Yeah.
I lost 2 years of my daughter's life, and that I thought that this was more important than my family. So I would figure out how to be present for my family at the same time I was doing this.
That's a tough one. Now, Liz, I thank you for sharing that because as a father, as a parent myself, there's certainly things I wish I could have redone. you know, it is what it is, but that's a powerful one for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
like they say, when your time has come, you're never going to regret the meeting you didn't go to, but you regret the
That's
concert you didn't go to.
absolutely true.
Unfortunately, you know. And listen, my son's a big baseball player. He's a junior in high school. And he has college aspirations. I'll leave it at that. And my wife and I have spoken about it, and we know one day will be his last baseball game. And sometimes you don't know
Mm,
which that last game will be. So um, I can appreciate what you're saying.
yeah.
So you obviously had a very interesting experience, in healthcare, at the pinnacle, at the CEO level, in a very interesting time with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Um, you know, Personally, professionally, being able to, bring healthcare to the masses. I mean, it's a powerful experience. But now part of your story, again, isn't just on the professional side, of course, but it's also on the personal side, as I said in the intro. And unfortunately, you had a brain tumor diagnosis. I would have no idea how to process that information. Thankfully, I've never been through it, and hopefully I never will be. So what happened to you? Same question. What happened to you at that moment when you got that diagnosis?
So I went into the long story. The short version of the story is I
Mm-hmm.
had been going deaf in my left ear for about 2 years, and I finally went in for a hearing exam and walked out of that hearing exam being told that I needed to go get an MRI for my brain. And I was like, wait a minute, what are you saying? Like, you think I have a brain tumor? I then went to get the MRI, and they handed me the radiologist handed me the DVD at the time, or the CD, and she said, your next step is to call your doctor.
Mm.
What I heard was, you're going to die. Right. And so I go home. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. I put the DVD into my computer. It was 2015. We still had those. Put it into my computer, and any idiot could see that that brain scan lit up bright white with a ping pong size ball.
Yeah.
Anybody could tell that that wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And you know what I did? The first thing I did is I didn't call my husband. I got up, went upstairs, changed my clothes, and I went for a run. And I ran 8 miles that day, crying so loudly and so guffawing on the run, just thinking about what my
Mm.
family was going to do, and what my mom having to bury her daughter, and what was I going to do for my daughter and my husband, and just who was coming to the funeral. And yeah, I mean, you name it, I thought about
Wow.
it on that run. Uh, and then I came home and I changed my clothes and I went to work. I was at work by 2 o'clock, because what do you do? I don't know what you're supposed to do after you get diagnosed with a brain tumor. You go to work.
Are you kidding me?
Nope. I had like some important meeting that I needed to go to that day that, I think that for so long, and part of the reason this book is called You Don't Have to Achieve to Be Loved, is that I equated achievement so much to who I was, that it was like, well, I've got to go to work. I've got to keep achieving, because that means it's still me, right? That means the brain tumor hasn't won, that I'm still going to keep going and going and going. And I think also I spent so many years avoiding emotion that it was just easier to turn it off and just go to work and focus on something else. Now, when I got to work, I didn't hear a word that was said in that room. Like, let's be clear, I got there and it was like Charlie Brown, but like
Yeah.
at the moment, I thought it was really important for me to be there.
Wow. So you hear this, you go for a run. I can also appreciate, it's part of my therapy. I love to run, get a lot of great thinking done running. So
Mhm.
the things that go through your head, the impact to your mom, bearing your daughter, your husband, family, uh, but then also, thinking your own mortality and your death.
Mhm.
And so you let those emotions subside and then you suit up for work.
Yep.
So this is a very interesting twist on our conversation I didn't think was necessarily going to happen. So again, I'm the guy in this conversation, and we process emotions different than women do, of course. And let me ask you this, Becca. So you have the experience of getting fired from the healthcare experience as CEO. And earlier you said, you turned off being a woman, had to operate like a man, when you were in the room, so to speak.
Mhm.
The response to the brain tumor diagnosis you just shared, do you think that was different because of the corporate role that you had? Do you think you processed it more like a man?
I think that's actually a feasible response. I would say also that on top of that, um, I think I was raised in an Irish Catholic family, and we don't talk about emotions. We just talk around emotions. And so, like, I became a coach. I actually have like a little emotion wheel on my board over here. I think I
Right.
honestly didn't know what my emotions were, but I think that was probably exacerbated because, again, the only emotion that's allowed in any boardroom is anger. But
Mm.
underneath anger is hurt and disappointment and pain, but you never get underneath that in corporate America.
So you really think the only emotion in a boardroom is anger?
I really truly believe that.
Really?
Mhm.
Hmm. I can understand maybe not thinking there would be empathy there, sympathy, etc., vulnerability. That I can certainly appreciate. But anger, that's interesting. That's an interesting take on that. Okay.
I mean, very very few times is there happiness or joy or anything like that, I guess,
Mm.
I grew up in an environment where there wasn't a lot of celebration of successes, but there was a lot of challenging and what are we doing wrong and that type of thing.
All right. So take us back then. So obviously you're a personal executive coach. Um, how did you evolve professionally into that role? I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, so, after the brain tumor, so I had surgery in 2015.
Hmm.
When I came off that table, it was as if I had a stroke. My, left side was my face was paralyzed for a year. I'm mostly blind in my left eye. I'm deaf in my left ear. And so I had to learn to walk again. So I spent several months kind of recovering. And once I got to the point where my doctor was like, "Okay, it's time for you to go back to work." I had to prove to myself that the brain tumor wouldn't win, that it didn't win. And so at the time too, I was still kind of in this a little bit in this achievement mode. Like I just
Hmm.
thought like, "Okay, well, I'm going to
Hmm.
go back to work and I'm going to do this." So once I started to prove to myself, it took many months. When I went back to work, I mean, I couldn't say my B's and my P's, and my name is Becca Pearce. So, like, we were really we were really dealing with a very different Becca that left the office before surgery.
Right. Oh,
And,
that's cruel.
like
Oh my God. I'm sorry. That is cruel.
and it
Cruel.
was just off, so gently, people would be like, "So do you think maybe they're gonna send you to speech therapy?" Like, just so Um, and so once I finally proved to myself that I could do it, I felt like, okay, here I am. I'm leading projects again. I'm, doing this. I'm asking good questions. I felt like I was doing it again. I had a choice one day. And the choice was I could show up to the office for an 8 o'clock meeting,
Hmm.
or I could put my daughter on a bus at 8:30. And all of the sudden, it was like the lights. I was like, "Wait, why am I doing this? I don't care about the title. I don't want the stress. None of this matters because the minute you get a diagnosis, the only thing that matters in your entire life is time." And
Right.
the only thing that I thought cared about was putting my daughter on the bus one more day. Because for those 5 weeks between the time I was diagnosed to the time I was on the table, I had no idea if I was ever gonna be able to do that again. And all of a sudden, everything made sense in my life.
When you have that thought of, earlier you spoke about, 2 years of missing your daughter's, school events, etc. And then, hey, do I get to put her on the bus one more time? Uh, that really puts everything into perspective. I don't have to tell you, obviously. Um, so now, because I find this interesting, and again, myself, I'm a business development coach with Healy Success Solutions, obviously. So what you've been through, in particular on the personal side, how does that influence how you coach?
So I think that the if you speak to the people that I coach, I think the interesting thing is so when I came off that table, it was I'm almost like a bad after school special, right? Think of the former, drop your emotions at the door kind of person. And I came off that table and it was almost as if I was like, can we all sing Kumbaya? Like, what are we doing here? Like, can we
Mm-hmm.
walk through the grass barefoot? And so when I coach people now, and so to answer your question, I went back to school. I invested in myself. How did I do this? I invested in myself to go back to school to become an executive coach and open my own executive coaching firm. And I think the beauty of what the coaching is with me now is 50% of the time, we're talking about your bottom line. As a business owner, I'm talking to you about your bottom line. I'm talking about how much hours and energy you're wasting on the employee that you haven't fired yet. Like, we're getting down in the nitty gritty. And
Mm-hmm.
half the time, we're talking about what's the emotion keeping you from making that really difficult decision? Like, what is going on? And so that is it's that weird combination of the two that that my coachees say is the most valuable thing for them, that they know that I am not going to pull any punches, but I'm going to hold their hand while I'm saying the things that they don't really want to hear.
Okay, so now this is interesting. So obviously, in a coaching relationship, you can those relationships could be months or years, depending upon your engagement. So have you seen certain clients, executives, business owners, going through what you went through as far as missing time with kids? Um, and if you've been able to observe that, have you had instances where you bring it to their attention? Do they accept it? Do they get defensive? Because now you have a unique lens as a coach, and I'm sure you could very easily observe it. Where sometimes I'm imagining your client might not be able to.
Right. I have a client who is very similar to me. Every once in a while you run into somebody and you go, "Oh, you're the younger version of me."
Mm,
And she has built a business from, 2 million to 12 million, and she sits on 3 different boards, and
mm-hmm.
she, doesn't feel like she's doing anything well, kind of thing. And she came to a retreat that I ran, and I sat across from her and I said, you don't actually need to achieve to be loved, right? This is before the book even came out, but I said that to her and she says, "Yeah." And I said, "And your kids are only going to be in first grade and kindergarten once, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "That's it." In the next 12 hours, she completely redid her life. I mean, she set boundaries with and told her staff, "These are the boundaries I'm gonna hold. I'm gonna take my daughter to breakfast, I'm gonna drop my daughter off at school. I'm not gonna take meetings between these hours in the evening," and
Mm-hmm.
had her team hold her accountable. She had her husband hold her accountable. So I think that part of so interestingly, you do not need a coach who has been through something that you've been through. You don't need a coach who is in the same industry that
Right.
you have. But the value is looking at somebody who's been through it and understanding that they came out the other side happier. I think there is huge value in that. And that's why I attract the people that I do, which are, strong women business owners who are looking to grow their business, exit their business, and or change their lives. So I think that's um it really is valuable to have somebody that has gone through it.
And a recently released book, again, the title, you don't have to achieve to be loved.
Right.
Um, a book, as I'm sure you're well aware, is a big undertaking. Um, I always like to ask this question of authors: why did you write the book?
It took me years to come to terms with writing the book. Years of people saying, "Oh my gosh, you have a story to tell." And it wasn't until I finally started to listen to people who said, "I changed my life because of your story." Like, I know now that there is life beyond this title and beyond the American hustle, and
Mm.
you're happier, and I can change my life because I see your story. If you can do it, I can do it. And so I wrote the book as a tribute, I guess is how I would say it, to
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost a workbook. In it, there's so many journal questions, but it outlines the process that I now know everybody goes through when they go through change. It
Mm.
outlines that process, and it outlines the just mind-blowing realizations for me that helped me change my life. The number one being you don't have to achieve to be loved. And all of the other realizations that changed my life and help my clients change their lives. So I wrote it for so that other people don't have to go through what I did to change my life. That I'm saying here's the roadmap. If you want to do the change,
Mhm.
here's the roadmap so you can do it without having the 10 years of pain that I went through to get there.
Again, I haven't written a book myself. Uh, just kind of maybe even just speaking from the experience of being the author. Um, what was that experience like? What was maybe one of your bigger lessons learned in writing a book?
It first of all, it was hugely cathartic. This second of all, there were several times while writing that book that I looked at the computer and I said, "I didn't know that was true," until it came out of my fingers onto the computer screen. And I think the most important thing for me was it took 10 years of recovery for me to be able to have the perspective to write
Hmm.
it in a way that it was for other people. And it wasn't just me whining or crying or anything that would have come out prior to that. And so I think my biggest learning is having the perspective and recognizing. I will say that my publisher did an excellent job of forcing me down the path of nobody wants to read a memoir, right? No, unless you're famous, nobody's going to read a memoir. This is, I understand you have a story to tell. This is not what this is. This book is written for people who want to change their life. And it's
Hmm.
written in a way that allows you to understand what my story is, only in so much that it helps you.
Mm, interesting. Very interesting. So now, all right. So here's another twist because we've spoken a little bit about okay, women in the workforce, women, at executive level roles. Your experience, being in predominantly male dominated environments, as you discussed earlier. Um, so, in your just an interesting question for me, your practice, your coaching practice, more female clients, more male. What's the mix?
I coach both. I would say that 90% of the people I coach are women, and 75% of the people I coach are business owners. So
Right. Okay.
predominantly female business owners. That said, I coach, CEOs, I coach C-suite executives, I executive directors,
Mm.
anything across the board, but predominantly women business owners.
Do you think again? I'm just processing this as you and I having a conversation today. When speaking, on behalf of men out there, when you talk about in one of my notes in the intro was, you know, those life experiences cause you to rethink your version of success and how it
Mhm.
cost you your own self love. Now, I'm going to sound really ignorant, okay, as the guy here right now, and feel free to poke fun at me. Um, can guys process what the heck self love is? I'm dead serious. I might sound so ignorant, but it's just like as I'm hearing this, I'm like, yeah. I mean, and that's why I asked the question. You practice how many women, how many men, and for the male clients that you have, do you talk on the topic of self love and how they can embrace that?
I mean, I would argue that women don't even know how to process self-love.
Oh, that makes
That
me
that's
feel
not
better, Becca. I feel a little better. Okay.
I think that people are very good at knowing what they don't want, but they're not very good at knowing what they do want because, um, and I would say especially women, but I have a coaching friend who's a guy, and he says, Becca, everything that you say is true for women is also true for me. It's slightly different. You believe that you've got to take care of everybody else. Men believe that they've got to be on the white horse, making sure that everything's okay. Like I can't, if I am having an emotion, I can't show it because I got to be the one that's showing, making it seem like everything's okay. And so
Mm.
I think that as humans, and maybe because the American dream, maybe because of the definition of success, I think it's very hard for people to slow down and say, wait, it's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to believe in myself and believe that there's a different definition of success than the one that's been handed to me. And that requires self-love. And the reason it does that is because looking at yourself from the inside out as opposed to the outside in requires self-love. It requires you slowing down and recognizing that y- it's okay to love yourself no matter whether or not you're succeed whatever success is for you at that moment.
Hmm.
um, Whether or not the Joneses think that you're successful doesn't matter.
Mm.
And so I think that to answer your question, I think everybody has difficulty with it. I think that, it really is just a very hard concept for people to begin looking internally first at what their definition is before they can
Okay.
look outward and not play the comparison game.
All right, makes me feel a little better. Um, how about? Well, no. Let me rephrase the question. Now, today, 2026. How does Becca Pearce define success?
I actually have it written down because the number one thing that I find is that people, when's the last time you wrote down your definition of success?
Mm.
And and so it's very easy to move the goalposts if you don't have that definition written down. And so for
Mm.
me, I have a personal mission to touch 10,000 people with one tidbit of information that changes the way they think.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
my definition of success is to make a kick-ass living, being able to support the clients that I serve to change their lives, where 80% of the time life wins and only 20% of the time will work take over that time, so that there's this I'm not of the core belief that 100% of the time I'm going to be able to live the life in this kumbaya state that, you know oh, everything's perfect, but 80% of the time I want to win. That means I get to walk my dog in the middle of the day. That means I get to go watch my daughter play insert whatever sport is the season. That means all of the things that matter to me now, that I understand where my core
Mm-hmm.
values are, that I understand what my core needs are, which by the way is being outside at least once a day, no matter how miserable it is out. And so that is my definition of success.
I like it. That's a good one. Well thought out. So let me ask you this. So here's one last question for you. Um, you obviously have mentioned as part of your story is your daughter, and being able to get her one more time off the bus, and the thought of not being able to do that, how traumatic that thought was, especially that the morning, the day you heard the information when you got the MRI, et cetera. So let me ask you this. How's the relationship with your daughter now?
Amazing. She's a freshman at University of Maryland right now. I'm the one she calls when she's walking between class. Um, she and I have a great relationship. It's just the three of us. My husband and I haven't, she's an only daughter, and our family is strong and amazing. And if you guys want to see a picture of her, you can go to my website, morebeccapearce.com, because it's amazing.
Awesome. Awesome. Uh, Today's guest, Becca Pearce, one hell of a life story, taking the transition from healthcare CEO and realizing that trying to transcend the corporate ladder isn't always the definition of success we thought it would be. Now she's enjoying life as a personal executive coach and, of course, author of the new book, You Don't Have to Achieve to Be Loved. Thank you for sharing a lot of personal stories. Thank you for being vulnerable. And I say that as a guy. I probably don't share. I'm not vulnerable like that. So it's good to have people like you who are willing to be vulnerable. It makes for a great show. So again, thank you so much for being on board today.
Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciated your questions. Thank you.
You got it. And this is the Profit Express. Again, today's guest, Becca Pearce. You don't have to achieve to be loved. Just a tremendous way of looking at life and success that is just a very powerful reminder of how quickly life goes. And the one thing that she said that I can really resonate with is, will I have that chance to pick up my daughter at the bus one more time? And that's what we miss in life, not the board meeting. So hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. It's Tim Healy. Until next time, this is the Profit Express.